Hello everybody, welcome to my tutorials Make Games with GameMaker. My name's Michael Bateman, and over the past couple of years I've been teaching myself how to code and make video games with GameMaker. I started from absolute scratch. It's quite a big learning curve over the last couple of years, and so the aim of these tutorial videos is to help other people who are starting from scratch as well, so that they can also make their own video games and hopefully have a lot of fun while they're doing it like I have. Okay, I think that's all for now. Let's begin. Okay then, let's start right at the very beginning. So you've downloaded GameMaker, you've got this screen in front of you, and you're thinking, how on earth am I going to make my very first video game? Now, I think when you first download the software, everything can look a little bit daunting. Obviously, you've got all these different things down the left-hand side, which is your resource tree, and all these little buttons that you can use as shortcuts along the top. There's obviously lots of different things going on, and I think when you first start, you're going to be thinking, how on earth am I going to make a video game using all this? So what we're going to do quickly is just run through the key areas that you need to be worried about when you first start out, and then you'll sort of build into the other areas as you go along making your first few games. Now, when you first start out, the first key ones that you're going to be worried about are your sprites here at the top, your objects here, and your rooms folder here. So this resource tree here is basically just a group of folders that are going to contain all your resources for making your game. So when you compile it all together at the end, GameMaker will grab all this, put all the code, all your images, etc. together, and that's what will make your game. So these are essentially just used to separate things out. Now your sprites are basically where all your images go. So whenever you create any images, perhaps for a character that's walking along, or maybe you'll have a bullet or a rocket or something like that, all those get stored as sprites within this folder here. Now, in order for those sprites to do anything, so for them to be moving around the screen or to be firing off bullets or whatever they might be doing within your video game, you need to generate those sprites into objects, and these objects are given instructions by you about how they're going to behave within the video game. Rooms are basically the blank canvases that the player sees where all your different objects will be doing what they do. So if you think about different levels will be different rooms, or you might have a room that contains your instructions of how to play, or all these different things. That's where these are created, and you set the parameters such as the size of them and things like that within here. So they're going to be the three most important things to start off with. Along the top are basically just shortcuts to those areas, so creating sprites or creating a sound, creating a room or creating an object. And here we just have where we will run the game itself, where we can run it in debug mode or just run it as normal. And here is just where you start a new project, open an existing project, or save the game. This one we won't be using until the very end, because that's how you create the file that the user will then download and use to install your game on their system. Okay. So that gives us a very basic introduction into how the general layout of GameMaker is. Obviously there's lots of different areas that we haven't looked at. Some are sort of self-explanatory, such as sounds and backgrounds. You can probably get an idea of what sort of things we're going to be putting into those folders. And there's also the more difficult folders such as paths or scripts or shaders, which we'll look at a lot further down the line when we've really got to grips with the fundamental basics of how we put a game together. Not every game will be using these resources such as scripts, but once you start to make more complicated projects, that's when they're going to come into play. But certainly when you're starting out, and particularly if you're going to want to be looking at using the drag and drop parts of GameMaker, such as these things here and all these, then you're not going to be too worried about developing scripts and things like that. Okay, so be sure to join me for the next tutorial where we'll start to create our very first game. That's going to involve generating our very first sprite, creating it into an object, and let's look at trying to get it into a room so that the player can move it around and we can start to develop our very first looking game. Cheers for now.